You put in 60 hours a week. You arrive early. You leave late. You say yes when others refuse. You stick to the rules. You give up your time, your energy, your health for the job, the team, and the hope of a better future. You're loyal. You're truthful. You take pride in doing things the right way. And yet somehow you're stuck on the sidelines, watching someone else rise. Someone who cuts corners, talks more than they works, who knows the right people but doesn't have your skills. Climb faster, live the life you thought you were working toward. And you're left thinking, where did I go wrong? But maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe the real question is, what lie have I been told? From childhood, you were taught that hard work leads to reward, that effort equals outcome, that if you just grind long enough, the system will eventually notice, recognize, and repay you. But what if that formula is broken? Worse, what if it was never real to begin with? Nietzsche, the German philosopher who dismantled illusions and uncovered the underlying structure of human belief, once claimed that moral labor, the kind of work praised for its self-sacrifice, compliance, and modesty, isn't noble at all. It's a form of spiritual bondage, a psychological snare meant not to elevate you, but to keep you exactly where you are. Because here's the uncomfortable reality. In a world where power shapes results, morality is often a tool used to restrain those who don't possess it. You were taught to believe that virtue is its own reward, that if you just kept your head down and stayed good, life would eventually be fair. But life isn't fair. Life is competitive. Life is political. And the system you serve doesn't reward virtue, it rewards value. Not the value you create, but the value you control. That's why the nurse pulling a 12-hour shift gets paid less than the TikToker selling a get-rich-fast course. That's why a blue-collar worker who breaks their back every day will retire with barely enough, while someone who manipulates markets walks away with millions. It's not your fault you believe the myth. In fact, the myth was crafted for people like you, to keep you compliant, to keep you grinding, to keep you from asking the uncomfortable questions like, who gains from my loyalty? Who benefits from my burnout? Why does the system celebrate hard work but reward something entirely different? Nietzsche never said, stop working. He didn't glorify idleness or promote selfishness. What he questioned was the belief that obedient labor is automatically moral, that suffering without return is somehow noble, that submission is a virtue. He called this way of thinking slave morality, a belief system rooted not in strength but in weakness, not in power but in fear. And if you feel stuck even though you've done everything right, you're not losing it. You're waking up. You're starting to realize that the world isn't broken. It's operating exactly the way it was designed to. The ones who rise aren't always the most capable or the most giving. They're the ones who understand power. They know how to move through it, how to claim it, and how to separate their sense of worth from the system's approval. So ask yourself, what if working harder is not the answer? What if the belief in moral labor is not your salvation, but your cage? Because until you confront that lie, you'll keep grinding while someone else rewrites the rules. Let's take a closer look at the contradiction hiding in plain sight. If hard work leads to success, then why do the hardest working people in society so often struggle just to survive? Think about it. The construction workers who rise before the sun and labor until their backs ache. The nurses who pull 12-hour shifts racing between patients, skipping meals, missing holidays. The delivery drivers, janitors, bus operators, truckers, people who keep cities alive, who make the physical world function. And yet, these are the same people who live paycheck to paycheck, who worry about rent, who can't afford to get sick. Meanwhile, someone filming get-rich-quick tips in a rented Lamborghini on TikTok is making more in a day than that nurse earns in a month. You've seen it, you can feel it. This isn't some unusual flaw in the system. It is the system. Because while it's labor that builds the world, it's not labor that runs it. The highest earners, politicians, CEOs, hedge fund managers, thought leaders, aren't the ones out there grinding in the cold or sweating under the sun. They're not the ones pushing their physical limits or wearing down their bodies. They move in a completely different realm, a realm of perception, ownership, and control. They don't merely work, they influence, they position, they possess. Let's be brutally honest. The world we've built doesn't reward value through effort. It rewards it through power. It's a world where owning networks, capital, and narratives brings in far more than actually creating anything real. And that world? It didn't happen by accident. It was built that way. It's easy to believe it's unjust, to think something went wrong along the way. But once again, this isn't some flaw in the system. It's exactly how the game's been designed for generations. Because no matter how honest it is, physical labor can be outsourced, automated, replaced, and ultimately devalued. But control over people, over ideas, over resources, that scales. A nurse can care for one patient at a time. An investor, with a single click, can shift billions. And scale is what the system rewards. Now, this is where the myth of moral labor becomes especially cruel. We've been taught to believe that suffering is virtuous, that endurance is dignity, that quiet sacrifice is the foundation of a good society. And in many ways, it is. But morality doesn't cover the rent, praise doesn't create generational wealth, and sacrifice alone doesn't lead to power. While the working class is told to keep their heads down and be thankful, those at the top are trained in law, in capital, in manipulation, in strategy. They're not taught to serve, but to manage. Not to endure, but to control. They study the rule, and then they learn how to bend them. So ask yourself this: if moral labor is so noble, so vital, why doesn't it come with power? Why are the workers we can't live without the ones most easily cast aside? Why does society glorify hard work, only to divert the rewards to someone else? Nietzsche would say it's because the moral system itself was crafted by the powerful, not to liberate the masses, but to pacify them. It teaches obedience, not sovereignty, self-sacrifice, not self-assertion. It glorifies submission, then punishes those who dare to question the hierarchy. That's why the lie persists. Because it benefits those in charge. Because it keeps people striving, hoping, and working for a reward that never comes. Because the promise of someday is the most effective chain ever forged. So the question becomes clear: if hard work doesn't lead to power, then what does? And more importantly, are you willing to unlearn the lie you were raised to believe? To understand how this lie took hold, why the world continues to reward manipulation over merit, perception over perseverance, we have to go deeper. We have to look at the foundation of the values we've been taught to live by. And that brings us to Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche didn't view morality as some universal virtue. He saw it as a tool, crafted and wielded by the powerful to serve their own agendas. To him, morality wasn't about truth, it was about strategy. He made a clear distinction between two opposing moral frameworks, master morality and slave morality. Master morality rises from strength. It honors ambition, daring, creativity, and the will to shape the world without asking. It doesn't seek approval, it asserts its own worth. The one who lives by master morality defines good as whatever expands their power, their freedom, their ability to create and command. Strength isn't condemned, it's admired. And virtue? It's whatever uplifts life, power, and potential. But slave morality, that's a different story. It's born out of weakness, crafted by those who can't compete in the arena of power, so they rewrite the rules. They insist that humility is greater than strength, that obedience is more virtuous than dominance, that suffering is a mark of moral purity. In this framework, traits once seen as weakness are rebranded as virtues, because it's the only way the powerless can reclaim a sense of dignity in a world they have no control over. And here's the catch. Once this code takes root, it becomes sacred, unquestionable. It's no longer viewed as a survival tactic. It's handed down as universal truth. This is how moral labor came to be praised. The idea that good people sacrifice, that honorable people serve, that virtue lies in doing your duty, expecting nothing in return. We romanticize the worker who never complains, who always says yes, who puts the needs of others before their own, without realizing that this narrative serves those who benefit from their silence. Nietzsche would tell you, you are not rewarded for your morality. You are pacified by it. You're praised for being dependable, promoted for being manageable, rewarded not to empower you, but to keep you from asking questions. The system throws you a title, a plaque, a raise, just big enough to keep you hopeful, just small enough to keep you dependent, and all the while the true currency, ownership, control, power, remains out of reach. So why does this belief still hold so much power? Why do millions of people still cling to the promise that suffering equals virtue, that sacrifice will be seen, that obedience will be rewarded? Because the story is beautiful, because it gives meaning to pain, because it allows people to endure unfairness without confronting it. Slave morality survives not because it is true, but because it is comforting. And comfort is a powerful sedative. But Nietzsche didn't write to comfort. He wrote to awaken, to force us to confront the terrifying freedom that comes when you stop waiting for justice and start creating your own terms. And so the real question begins to take shape. Not just why we were taught to suffer quietly, but who benefits when we do. But if this system is so rigged, so clearly designed to reward control over contribution, why do so many good people still believe in it? Why do millions of hardworking men and women continue to chase a promise that rarely delivers? The answer isn't purely economic. It's psychological. And it begins long before your first paycheck ever arrives. From an early age, we're taught that the world is just, that good people get good outcomes, that justice always finds a way. Cartoons, bedtime stories, classroom lessons, they all echo the same soothing message. Do the right thing and you'll be rewarded. Be kind, be honest, work hard, and eventually life will add up and make sense. But here's the catch. That belief has a name. Psychologists refer to it as the just world fallacy. The assumption that the world is naturally fair, that effort always leads to reward, that what you put in will inevitably return. It's a comforting idea. It gives people hope. It offers a way to make suffering feel meaningful. But it's not real. And holding on to it, especially in a system built to reward power over principle, isn't just misguided. It's dangerous. Because while you're staying late, rechecking spreadsheets, solving issues you didn't create, someone else is learning how to play the game. While you're saying yes, staying courteous, picking up the extra shift, someone else is building connections, mastering leverage, figuring out exactly how to bend the system in their favor. You think you're being moral, they're being strategic, and in this world, it's strategy that wins. That's why the engineer keeping the servers online gets laid off, while the reputation manager with the right political ties gets a promotion. That's why the nurse loses her weekend bonus, but the hospital's PR budget suddenly doubles. You were taught to trust the former. They were taught how to bypass the steps altogether. And here's where it turns cruel. The system doesn't just ignore hard work. It exploits your belief in fairness to keep you stuck. The longer you wait for your virtue to be seen, the easier you are to manage. Because people who believe justice is coming don't resist. They don't push back. They just keep waiting for recognition, for fairness, for someday. But someday never arrives. And this isn't just a matter of money. It's a matter of mindset. Because if you keep showing up with the wrong map, you'll never find the right destination. The rules you were given weren't meant to build powerful people. They were meant to produce obedient workers. And the ones who taught you those rules, they knew exactly how the game worked. They just needed someone else to keep playing it. So if the world isn't fair, if virtue doesn't lead to victory, then what does? How do you survive without becoming ruthless? How do you move forward without losing your soul? The answer isn't to abandon morality. It's to stop worshiping it, to stop treating sacrifice like a strategy, to realize that good intentions are not a plan, that in a world built on power, understanding power is part of being good, because when you open your eyes to the truth, that fairness is not a guarantee, but a story we've been sold to keep us quiet. Then you can finally begin to write your own. Not a story of blind sacrifice, but of conscious strength. Not obedience, but ownership. Not waiting for the world to change, but learning how to change your place in it. So what do you do once you've seen the lie? Once you realize that waiting to be rewarded for your obedience is a dead end, you don't throw away your morals. You redefine what strength looks like. This is the mistake many make when they first wake up. They think the only alternative to being exploited is becoming heartless. But Nietzsche didn't preach cruelty. He wasn't telling you to abandon integrity. He was telling you to stop confusing submission with virtue. His solution wasn't to destroy morality, but to overcome the morality of weakness. To become someone who doesn't just follow rules, but writes new ones. Someone who doesn't need permission to live with purpose. In Nietzsche's words, that person is the Übermensch, the overman. Not a tyrant, not a villain, but a fully realized individual. A creator of values. Someone who walks away from systems that no longer serve them and builds something better in their place. The Übermensch doesn't sit silently, hoping for recognition. He defines meaning for himself. He doesn't wait around for promotion. He makes an impact on his own terms. He sees the system clearly but refuses to be bound by it. He knows when to play the game and when it's time to flip the board entirely. He understands that power isn't inherently evil. It's essential. Not power over others, but power over yourself, your path, your purpose, your future. You've met people like this in real life. The entrepreneur who left a secure job behind to create something daring. The investor who transformed rejection into innovation. The builder who stopped waiting for approval and started taking bold risks. Take Elon Musk, for example. Pushed out of a company he co-founded, labeled reckless by critics. Yet he went on to build an empire fueled by vision, conviction, and an unwillingness to be governed by fear. What sets these people apart isn't just luck or talent. It's mindset. They didn't sit around waiting for the system to recognize them. They stopped asking, when will they see my value? And started asking, why did I give them that power to begin with? That shift from waiting to building, from submitting to owning, that's the path Nietzsche was pointing toward. That's what it truly means to step beyond the cage of moral labor. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Escaping that cage requires letting go of something deeply familiar. Your need to be seen as good. It means being willing to disappoint the people who profit from your silence. It means standing alone, at least for a while, as you begin laying down a new foundation. That demands more than just confidence. It demands courage. Because real strength isn't about control. It's about authorship. It's about crafting a life that reflects your truest values, not the ones handed down by a system built to keep you compliant. This isn't about becoming selfish. It's about becoming sovereign. So ask yourself, what would happen if you stopped waiting to be rewarded and started rewarding yourself with the life you actually want? What would it look like to stop asking for a seat at the table and start building your own? You don't have to become ruthless, but you do have to become responsible for your own power. Because once you realize the system won't save you, the only path forward is to stop being a servant of it and start becoming the author of something greater. So what does action look like after the awakening? After you've seen through the illusion of moral labor, after you've stopped waiting for fairness, after you've chosen not to abandon morality but to reclaim your power, what's next? It begins with this realization. Kindness isn't weakness. It's strategic kindness that holds real strength. Too often, people mistake being good for being passive. They believe that saying yes, steering clear of conflict, and always putting others first somehow makes them virtuous. But Nietzsche would argue, morality without awareness is nothing more than disguised obedience. The goal isn't to become cold or manipulative, it's to become aware. To move through the world guided by both a moral compass and a survival strategy. Strategic kindness means knowing when to offer help and when it's wiser to walk away. It's about reading people, not simply trusting them. It's about grasping the context, knowing when to speak up, when to hold back, and when to make your move. It doesn't mean saying yes just to be liked. It means saying yes only when it aligns with your goals, your integrity, your strength. Because the truth is this, not every job is worthy of your loyalty. Not every leader has earned your trust, and not every opportunity deserves your time. You have to become the kind of person who recognizes when it's time to walk away, when a situation no longer serves you, and has the strength to do it. Walking away isn't failure. Sometimes, it's the first step toward real freedom. This is where true power begins. Not as something taken from others, but as something you reclaim for yourself. The power to create, the power to say no, the power to build systems where you're not just earning, you're owning. Where your energy doesn't simply keep someone else's machine running, but drives a mission that actually reflects your values. That might look like starting your own business, building a second stream of income, or learning how influence really works. Not to manipulate, but to protect your vision. It could mean mastering negotiation, setting clear boundaries and saying, I'm done with this, and standing by it. These aren't betrayals of your values. They're signs of your growth. Because here's the truth, if you don't learn how to navigate the power game, you'll always be a pawn within it. But if you do learn, you don't have to sacrifice your soul along the way. The key is to treat power as a tool, not a trophy. Let your ethics set the direction, but let strategy shape the decisions along the way. Nietzsche said it plainly, power isn't evil. It's the will to become more than a servant, more than just a cog, more than the good employee. It's the drive to become the author of your own value. And you can't do that if you treat morality like a cage. You have to use it as a compass. One that points toward your true north, not towards someone else's approval. So no, don't abandon your principles. Don't become just another jaded player chasing status for the sake of status. But do learn how the game works. Understand leverage. Learn to tell the difference between being valued and being used. Because the future doesn't belong to the obedient. It belongs to those who are clear-minded, conscious, and capable of blending principle with power, empathy with edge. It belongs to those who don't wait for the world to shift. They learn to rewrite the terms of their own existence. If you were raised to believe that hard work alone is enough, that keeping your head down, staying loyal, and doing things the right way will eventually pay off, then it's time to wake up. Not because hard work has no value, but because without power, without ownership, without strategy, it will keep you exactly where you are. The real man doesn't just labor. He sees the system clearly. He studies how it works, understands its mechanics, and when the rules stop serving him, he creates new ones. That's the line between merely surviving and truly leading, between being a cog in someone else's machine and stepping into the role of architect for your own future. So if you're done waiting, if you're over the myth that sacrifice alone will carry you, if you're ready to think sharper, move smarter, and live on your own terms, this is where it starts. Subscribe to explore a philosophy that doesn't just interpret the world, but equips you to reshape your place in it, one idea at a time, one deliberate choice at a time.